Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. We begin this evening with some breaking news. The FBI releasing disturbing new footage today showing the person who the FBI believes planted 2 bombs in D.C. the night before the Capitol riot. Those bombs never exploded, though investigators say the devices appear to be fully functional. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now. Pete, walk us through this new video, if you will.
Sorry, there are 4 new videos, and what the FBI hopes is that somebody will see these and see something that looks familiar in the way this person walks, in their mannerisms, what they're wearing, because they don't know who this person is. They believe this is the suspect. Now, this is the one we've shown before, and I hope we get to the 3 others, because this one really doesn't show much, other than the fact that the person was carrying a backpack and wearing a gray hoodie, and the FBI says was also wearing very distinctive footwear, Nike Air Max Speed Turf shoes that were black and light gray with yellow details. But if we don't show them here, you can find them on the FBI's website, fbi.gov. And the FBI, yeah, we're just going to show this one over and over again. So we're not seeing the most detailed new videos that came out today. But there were some other. There were some other here. All right, here we go. This is one of the new videos. Right. This is in a neighborhood near Washington. This is sitting on a park bench near the Democratic headquarters. And that second one may actually show the person planting one of the bombs, because the FBI has said that the pipe bomb near the Democratic headquarters was planted on a park bench. The third one was at the offices of the Republican National Committee, which is just behind that shot that you just saw. But like, if you look at this one here, you see the person standing on the street. Somebody walks past walking a dog, and this person has reached into their backpack, and it looks to me like put a pair of glasses on, and then right there takes them off and puts them back in the backpack. So the FBI is saying, you know, if you recognize this person, if you knew of somebody that was perhaps buying kitchen timers, because both these bombs had standard wind-up kitchen timers attached. They were made of 1-inch diameter metal pipe. And this new detail that they've released today, the explosive material inside the pipe was homemade black powder, or commonly called gunpowder, but it was homemade black powder. So the FBI and the ATF are offering a $100,000 reward for anybody who may have information about this person. But the investigators have, of course, depended heavily on public tips during the investigation of the Capitol riot, and they're hoping that somebody will see something here that's familiar, that will strike a familiar bell, and that will call in and help them identify this person. Now, as you said, neither of the bombs went off. They were discovered just before the rioters started to break through the police barricades at the Capitol the next day. The FBI believes they were planted. You'll see the time on there says 7:52. They believe they were planted between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. the night before the riots. So why didn't they go off? Were they intended to go off?
Yeah.
Why were they not discovered until 19 hours later? These are all questions that the FBI can't resolve until they figure out who this person is, Allison.
Pete, another question I have for you, because forgive me, I don't know this specific area in D.C., but do they have any sense of why the person might have wanted to put the bombs in this particular area? Again, as you said, they were put here the night before, but when the action perhaps was happening at the rally, we know the riots were at the Capitol. Do they have any sense of what it was about this particular spot?
No, I think the simple answer to the question is no. Now, there are some investigators, like, for example, the former chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, who believes that the 2 devices were planted to be a diversion, that because they were discovered just about the time the rioters arrived at the Capitol the next day, they drew a lot of police presence away from the Capitol to investigate these 2 discoveries of 2 bombs at 2 separate places a few blocks from the Capitol. So in the opinion of some investigators, this was a diversion. But again, why weren't they found until if they were planted at the latest 8:30 on the night before, and then they weren't found until just after 12:30 the next day, what accounts for that lag? Why is that? So that's just part of the mystery.
Yeah, Pete, it's just wild to watch this guy walking down the street. Now, I say guy, but we don't know yet if it's a man or woman.
Exactly.
Yes.
I was just going to say that.
They don't know yet, right? This person, but it is so disturbing to see someone walking, stretching, a person walking a dog right by them when they had pipe bombs in a backpack. It is really just wild to actually see that overnight video.
Indeed.
Pete Williams, thanks so much for running us through what we do know so far. I know they've got a long way to go in this investigation. Appreciate it.
You bet.
The House, less than 24 hours away from voting on the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Majority Whip Jim Clyburn saying they want the bill on President Biden's desk before this week is out.
The fact of the matter is we are working on that bill right away. We plan to vote on it at least by tomorrow. I think the House will come in session around 9 o'clock. So we want to get this bill to the president for his signature before the end of the week.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joining us now. Leanne, I got to ask, it took 70 hours for this bill to get from the Senate to the House. They are not all that far apart from each other. So why did this take so very long?
No, it takes about 70 seconds to walk from the House to the Senate. But there actually is a very complicated process. It's not just the printing of the legislation, but it's also making all the changes that were made in the Senate version of the bill. And those changes were just released a few moments ago, and there were a lot of them, most of them very minor technical changes that don't have a lot of impact on the legislation. Others did, but just incorporating those changes into the legislation and then the Senate staff going line by line, making sure everything is accurate. That took 70 hours, but now the House finally has it and they're moving forward. Allison.
All right, Leanne, now we know why it took so long, even though it's just a 70-second walk. Let me ask you this part. House Democrats confident they have the votes to pass this bill. But what are you hearing from House Republicans about it today?
House Democrats are confident. Speaker Pelosi and her colleagues held a press conference championing the bill today, the day before they're actually going to vote on it and pass it tomorrow. But House Republicans, they've been struggling with their message on how to oppose this popular legislation out in the among the American public. Let's listen to how Representative Liz Cheney put it.
And it didn't have to be this way. We could have had a bill that was, a fraction of the cost of this one that could have gotten bipartisan approval and support. But the Speaker decided to go in another direction. And so we are going to be saddled with a burden, spending burden, and a tax burden that is really indefensible from the perspective of what it actually accomplishes.
You got some insight there into what Republicans would have wanted, which is something much smaller than Democrats did. And so that is why the Speaker Pelosi and Democrats didn't work with Republicans. They wanted a big bill. So Republicans are really trying to figure out the best way to message this. But it seems like while they're trying to find a message that sticks, it's looking like they're going to continue to focus on other issues that aren't related to this COVID bill as an opposition technique. Like they're on the Senate House floor right now calling for legislation to reopen schools, which is not related to COVID bill, which is what they're supposed to be talking about. Allison.
Yeah, let's talk more about this, Leanne. We know the House certainly has other business to deal with besides COVID relief. I hope everyone is okay in there. That sounded like something heavy just dropped. The House did not vote, however, on 13 separate bills last night because of Republican opposition. So what are House leaders saying now about that holdup and how long it might take to get through all those votes and make those actually happen?
Yeah. Well, first, everything's fine. People putting away equipment, marble walls.
Good, okay.
It's okay. There's a lot of partisanship among the House, especially right now. I mean, on both sides of the chamber. But what Republicans are trying to do is protest not being able to offer amendments on legislation, other things that they think that they don't have access to, as far as working with some Democrats on moving legislation forward. And so they are trying to gum up the works and call for votes on these very non-controversial bipartisan bills that would really slow down the process in the House. Let's listen to Steny Hoyer of House Democratic leadership. Oh, it's just a graphic, and I'm sorry. But this graphic, what Steny Hoyer said is that Republicans have threatened to ask for a vote on each one of those bills, which would have taken some 10 hours of voting on these so-called suspension bills. And so there is a big, big logjam and partisan fight that is bubbling up behind the scenes on these very, very non-controversial bills as Republicans are trying to have some say in what happens in the House of Representatives. Allison.
Leanne, don't feel bad. I thought you were about to toss to sound as well. It's not just you. Let me ask you one last question before you go. I know 2 Republican senators announced today that they are putting Deb Haaland's nomination for Interior Secretary on hold. Why? What's the issue there?
Yeah, these are 2 Western state senators, one from Wyoming, one from Montana, who say that Deb Haaland, her opposition to fossil fuel exploration, to pipelines, is something that is going to kill jobs in their energy-reliant states. And so Senator Daines and freshman Senator Lummis say that they are going to try to hold up her confirmation. Of course, all they can do is delay. They cannot derail her confirmation, so it could take some more time for her to be confirmed out of the Senate. Allison.
All right, Leanne Caldwell, never a dull moment on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The royal family breaking their silence today, responding to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's shocking allegations in their interview with Oprah Sunday night. In a new statement released on behalf of the Queen, Buckingham Palace writing, the issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez joins me now from London. Raf, that interview aired in the U.S. Sunday, there in the UK yesterday. Buckingham Palace not exactly rushing to acknowledge Meghan and Harry's accusations. How would you describe the tensions within the royal family tonight?
Allison, the royal family are trying to draw a line under this explosive interview by Harry and Meghan. They're hoping that this 4-sentence statement they put out will be enough to address 2 hours of really serious, detailed claims. It's not clear if that is going to work. A lot of supporters of Harry and Meghan saying the royal family owes it to them and to the public to take seriously the specific allegations. Meghan saying that she had suicidal thoughts and wasn't able to get help, saying a senior royal insider expressed concern about how dark her baby's skin would be. It is interesting. The royal family is trying to address this as a private family matter. Of course, the monarchy is part of the constitutional framework of this country. And a lot of people are saying, listen, if there are racist remarks being made at the top level of the monarchy, this is something that needs to be dealt with in public, in the public interest, and dealt with openly. Allison?
Oprah Magazine posted a new portion of the interview that did not air here in the U.S. on Sunday. In it, Meghan talks about losing her privacy. Here she is.
Shouldn't you have an expectation that you're going to have to lose privacy?
Well, it's 2 things here.
That's part of the deal.
2 things here. I think everyone has a basic right to privacy. I think life is about being able to share our stories and share parts of our lives that you're comfortable with. There's no one who's on Instagram or social media that would say, because I shared this one picture, that entitles you to have my entire camera roll. Go ahead, look through it. No one would want that. So it's about boundaries and it's about respect.
Raf, more than 12 million people, I understand, tuned in to watch this interview in the UK last night. So what's your sense here? What are you hearing? Are Brits sympathizing with Meghan and Harry, or are they standing up for the royals?
Allison, the reaction has been very polarized in this country, as it has been around the world. There was a Snap poll taken after the interview. It found 47% of the British public thought what Harry and Meghan did by Telling All with Oprah was inappropriate. Only 20% thought it was appropriate. But I'll tell you, this thing does sort of break down along political lines that might be familiar to viewers in the U.S. I'd say there is a younger, more progressive demographic, quite sympathetic to a young couple saying they're struggling with issues of racism, of mental health. They're not getting the support they need. And then there is perhaps a larger camp that maybe skews a little older, a little more conservative, that sees what Harry and Meghan did as kind of undignified, not very royal, and in some ways undermining the royal family, undermining the Queen, and perhaps in some broader sense, attacking the United Kingdom itself. So passions running very high here, opinions very polarized. Allison.
A last question for you here. Piers Morgan, a name we know well here in the U.S., leaving ITV's Good Morning Britain after comments he made about Meghan Markle, specifically calling this interview a trash-a-thon of the monarchy and saying he doesn't believe a word Markle said. Now the UK's Office of Communications is investigating yesterday's show. What are they looking into here?
Yeah, Allison, this was a very explosive moment. As you say, Piers Morgan, not known for keeping his opinions to himself, basically suggesting that he didn't believe things Meghan Markle said, really banging the table, suggesting that she had somehow undermined the royal family. This went down poorly. There was a wave of 40,000 complaints from the British public to Ofcom, which is the British broadcasting regulator. It upholds certain standards in terms of what people can say on the airwaves. Piers Morgan was back on his show this morning. He tried to slightly walk back what he had said initially, but it seems like everybody felt the situation was pretty much untenable. He is now stepping back. And again, it shows you just how much this interview, this whole saga, has been dividing the country. Allison?
It has certainly captivated our attention here across the pond. Raf, thank you so much for your reporting. All right, let's check in with NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She's got the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hey, Simone.
Hey, Allison, we're going to start with this. Mexico turning to China for its vaccine supply. The Mexican Foreign Relations Secretary saying they will receive a total of 32 million doses from 2 Chinese companies. Doses of the vaccines have already arrived and delivery is expected through the summer. Well, in Myanmar, the military government is shutting down media coverage of the protests. Media companies are not allowed to broadcast, write, or give information, that's a direct quote, on any platform or using any media technology. Since the coup began, dozens of journalists have been detained. And all of Hawaii is under a flash flood warning after heavy rains hit the state. The Maui Fire Department saying it responded to over a dozen calls from people who are trapped by the rising water. Officials are asking residents not to return until those flood advisories are lifted. And Japan deciding not to allow foreign fans into the country for the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. That's according to a Japanese news agency. Officials citing public concern over potential COVID-19 spread as the reason. No word on how many Japanese fans would be allowed to attend the games in person. And some sad news about the president's dogs. President Biden's 2 German Shepherds, Major and Champ, are back home in Delaware after the younger of the 2, Major, had a, quote, biting incident with a White House security member. A White House official told NBC News they will be back in the White House and are staying with friends and family until the First Lady finishes her travels. So sad to see that, Allison. We hope to see them back in the White House and hopefully a little less aggressive. Hopefully they work out everything that's going on there.
Look, they're upset. Flotus isn't around. I get it. When I leave the house, the dog gets upset. When she gets back home, they might be able to work this all out.
Probably a major adjustment settling into that big White House that they're in now. So, yeah, we hope that they can work it all out.
I can't imagine. Definitely a big change for the pups. Hope they are back there safe and sound soon. Thank you, Simone. President Biden pitching his American Rescue Plan to small business owners in D.C. today, telling them his relief package will target the businesses that need it most.
One of the reasons why I changed the rule for 20 days to make sure only employers who had 20 or fewer employees could qualify for PPE. And the reason for that was 400,000 small businesses went out of business. They got in line, but they couldn't get the help.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joining me now from Washington, D.C. Mike, the president also mentioned the inspector general will be involved here, making sure these PPP loans get to the right people. What else did the president say about the changes his administration is making to the Paycheck Protection Program?
Well, Allison, of course, this program originated in the Trump administration. It was a part of those early rounds of COVID relief last year. But the president today using this visit to a hardware store here in the District of Columbia to highlight ways in which the Biden administration is increasing both the reach of it and the oversight. You heard him just in that initial soundbite talking about the fact that there's this exclusive application period for the smallest of small businesses, reflecting some of the criticism he made during the campaign that a lot of this money went to bigger businesses that didn't necessarily need the help. The other part has to do with oversight of the program, making sure that the same kind of businesses that need the help get it. He talked a little bit about that as well. Let's take a listen.
We found out that an awful lot of that went to bigger businesses that, in fact, weren't supposed to qualify for this because they there used to be a thing called Inspector General to see where the money went, and the last administration fired the Inspector General, so a lot of the money went to people who shouldn't have gotten help, and it didn't go to folks who. But you know, we've significant with this new program, and we're going to continue this, by the way. It's not only, you've been the only businesses with fewer than 20 folks could apply in the last couple of weeks. But now we're going to keep the focus on it.
Now, Allison, you'll notice this is the second day in a row in which the president has left the White House grounds to try to promote some of the elements of this COVID relief bill. That's not an accident, of course, even though it's close to reaching the finish line with the House vote expected tomorrow. The president believes not only you can't take anything for granted in selling this before that final vote, but even once it's passed, the Democrats need to be out there and touting its benefits in the weeks and months to come, knowing that what happened in the Recovery Act when he was vice president in 2009, as he put it last week in a meeting with House Democrats, he said President Obama was too modest to take a victory lap, and something that he thinks Democrats need to be doing now.
Mike, the COVID relief bill should hit the president's desk this week once he signs it. What is the administration's next big legislative push? I imagine they don't get a whole lot of breathing room before the next item comes up.
That's right, Allison. Well, the way that the president laid this out before he took the oath of office was first order of business was this rescue package, and then you move into recovery mode, that once you fill in the hole, then you need to build a new foundation for economic growth. So all indications are that the next big legislative effort is going to focus on what he proposed in the campaign, a Build Back Better, which had a number of planks, one of them being infrastructure. But two big questions that the White House is not necessarily answering at this point yet. One, is it going to be a narrowly tailored, small, traditional infrastructure program, roads, bridges, that kind of thing? And secondly, will it be something that he has to do through the reconciliation process? Again, we've been talking so much about proposals to reform the filibuster to make it easier to pass legislation. If he does do a much bigger, more ambitious infrastructure program that includes other initiatives like climate initiatives as well, then he might need to use that 50-vote reconciliation process yet again. But traditionally, of course, infrastructure is something that has bipartisan appeal. President Trump spent 4 years talking about how he wanted to do a big infrastructure package. So if the White House thinks they might be able to get infrastructure on its own done, a smaller package, then maybe they'll try to do that with as much Republican support as they can get.
Mike, the Biden administration dealing with an escalating crisis at the border. Sources telling NBC News a record number of unaccompanied children are being held in ice boxes, facilities that are really meant for adults. What is the White House saying about all this?
Well, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki today came to the briefing room trying to address the ongoing questions about whether or not, and as the White House is dodging questions about whether it's a crisis at all. She offered several explanations for what we're seeing at the border, including the fact that, as she put it, there were other reasons, not just the president's own policies here, as he's been accused by Republicans of relaxing immigration policies to the extent that it's created a magnet for this kind of crisis. Take a listen to what else she had to say at the briefing today on this.
Obviously, there was a trip to the border this weekend. They are working over the course of every day since then on putting in place policies that can help address what we're seeing and help ensure that we are keeping these kids safe and moving them as quickly as possible from Border Patrol facilities to shelters where they can have access to educational resources, health resources, mental health resources, legal aid, et cetera.
Alison Saki is referring there to a quiet, wasn't really much attention or press coverage of it, a meeting that was a delegation from the White House that went down to the border to try to learn some of the facts on the ground, report back to the president. Some of the circumstances she explained for why we're seeing this surge at the border, it has nothing to do with the president's policy. She explained that it has to do with, for instance, the fact that there were hurricanes that affected Central America and Mexico, as well as the fact that, yes, we're in an ongoing pandemic, and that means some of the facilities down there that would typically house more people need to be spread out in more different places because of the COVID restrictions as well. But clearly something the White House is getting a lot of questions about and having some difficulty addressing.
Yeah. All right, Mike Memley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Alison.
The murder trial of Derek Chauvin moving ahead with jury selection today. Yesterday, the judge in the case sent potential jurors home while lawyers debated adding a third-degree murder charge. George Floyd's sister, Bridget, was in the courtroom for that debate, calling it an emotional roller coaster of a day. She walked out when Chauvin's attorney brought up her brother's alleged drug use. Only one member of Floyd's family is allowed in the courtroom each day because of COVID. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster outside that courthouse in Minneapolis. He joins me now. Shaq, we'll get back to George Floyd's sister in just a moment. But first, tell us what's going on with the trial today. How are they doing with jury selection?
We're in a brief pause right now, but so far they are on their eighth person, their eighth potential juror now being questioned. But they have, in panel there, they have selected two members for that jury. So you get a sense of how this pace is going at this point. You know, watching the jury selection process, you get a sense of how difficult this can be. You know, these jurors are asked questions about their feelings about law enforcement, their interactions with law enforcement, how they feel about the Black Lives Matter movement, if they can spend and dedicate a lot of time to serve on this jury panel. And you're learning a lot about these people. Of course, we're not seeing them. We only hear their voices. But it's through that process that we're learning a lot. And one thing that you know is that both sides have what they call a peremptory challenge. That's essentially a discretionary challenge. They can strike a juror just for whatever reason they decide to. But sometimes when they do that, that leads to some challenges and some headbutting. Look at this moment a little bit earlier today.
Draw the parallel between juror number 4, who's Hispanic, and juror number 2, who's self-identified as Caucasian or white. Their answers with respect to these questions that were raised by defense counsel are markedly similar, if not the same. One results in a preemptory strike and the other does not.
The difference between this particular juror and the prior juror is that the prior juror had not watched the video. He had limited his intentional exposure. He had no preconceived opinions whatsoever.
The judge later sided with the defense and said that there was a, quote, race-neutral reason for those folks to be dismissed. But you get a sense of what we're going to be seeing as this process plays out. This is going on for up to 3 weeks. Again, they only got 2 people selected who have gone through without any challenges on the jury on the jury. They're trying to seat 12 permanent jurors, but also 4 alternates. So you can get a sense and you can do the math of how long that could potentially take. Allison.
Yeah. It could be a little while, Shaq. I also know the prosecutors asked for a stay in the case. Could you tell us why and how the defense responded to that?
Yeah, this is something that was the reason for the delay that we saw yesterday. Essentially, the prosecutors have been trying to add a third-degree murder charge to this case, and the judge dismissed it back in October. Well, an appellate court on Friday, and we talked about this, the appellate court said that the judge needs to reconsider that. Well, then the defense, so Chauvin's attorneys, said they're appealing that to the state Supreme Court. Bottom line, because that decision is still being decided and still being argued over, the prosecution is asking the judge to put a pause on the trial to let that process settle itself so the jury knows exactly what is being charged against this former police officer. The judge says until a higher court stops him, he's going to continue to impanel this jury. He knows that we can't there is a problem if we got to the opening statements for continuing this with that matter unsettled. But he says, at least this phase right now, he can handle this, and that is in his jurisdiction. So that's kind of the legal back and forth that you're dealing with right now.
Shaq, our colleague Gabe Gutierrez talked with Floyd's sister Bridget after she walked out of the courtroom. What did she say about that? And do we know who is in the court today from the Floyd family?
Today, it's George Floyd's first cousin who is in the courtroom today. But you mentioned earlier in the introduction that only one member of the family could be in the courtroom at a time because of the social distancing requirements. This is a modified courtroom, for example. I know in some of the video you see the plexiglass. So only one family member is allowed in at a time. And yesterday, it was noted that at a time when the defense lawyer, the defense attorney, so Chauvin's lawyer, was arguing and mentioning George Floyd's past drug use, that was the point where you saw his sister actually walk out of the courtroom. She was only gone for about 2 minutes, and then she came back in. But our colleague, Gabe Gutierrez, did talk to her. Listen to how she explained that.
I didn't like the things that they were saying. And I want them to get down to the core, to the root. And what his lawyer was saying wasn't the root. He was bringing up things that did not matter. What we are here for is justice. That's what we need, justice. He needs to be held accountable for his actions.
One thing that is very clear is just how emotional this process will be for the family. We saw his brother last week break down in an interview with our colleague Gabe Gutierrez about this process. So this is something that's going to be hard, not only for the Floyd family, but really for the entire community. And that's why so many eyes are on this case, Allison.
Yeah, Shaq, I know yesterday there were people out in the streets demanding justice. What's it like today around the courthouse in Minneapolis in general?
Compared to that first day, it's much more quiet. There have been very few protesters. There have been some scattered about on different sides of the courthouse, but there hasn't been that large organized demonstration that we saw on the first day. Of course, the first day is when so many of those demonstrators said they wanted to come out to have their voice be heard, to show support for George Floyd. But, now we're in this jury selection process. You saw how those hearings go in the clip that I played initially. This is going to be a slow process. We still have opening statements coming up. That's still about 2.5 weeks away at this point. So it's going to be some time, and I think things will fluctuate in terms of that. But in terms of the security precautions that are here, that Operation Safety Net that we were talking about, the fencing protecting the courthouse and the National Guard deployment, that is all still here. And we know from the city leaders that is something, that presence will escalate throughout the process of this trial, Allison.
All right, Shaq Brewster for us in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, they fought the Islamic State. Now they are on the front lines of another battle, gender equality. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell takes us inside a women's militia group determined to make Syria a better place.
They started as young women, some still in their teens, raised in a world where girls were forbidden to play soccer, go to university, or choose their own husbands, transformed into snipers and battlefield commanders. Syrian Kurdish women in 2014, battling ISIS in house-to-house combat in the city of Kobani, defending their people from being kidnapped, raped, tortured, and killed. Women like Nowruz, who became known to the U.S. commanders and her women's militia as General Nowruz.
Had you ever thought that you would become a war fighter?
We were dragged into the war in a place where there was no choice for a decent life, especially for women. They took over women's mind, body, and everything else.
If injured and surrounded, some blew themselves up with grenades to avoid being captured. One of the most fearless was Azima, whom Richard Engel met in Kobani at the height of the battle.
Now we run, she says.
Swashbuckling, but outnumbered and outgunned, she was later wounded, reports journalist Gail Lamont, who tells their story in The Daughters of Kobani.
They shot her. They hit her nearly in her heart, and yet she gets out of bed at the end of the battle for Kobani, when ISIS is handed its first loss, and she makes sure she's standing there to say, women were a part of this defeat for ISIS.
3 years later, alongside the U.S., they were driving ISIS out of its territorial capital, Raqqa, and by 2019 declaring victory over ISIS, earning high praise from the former CENTCOM commander.
How would you describe the women fighters?
They were well motivated, they were fit, they rose to the occasion, they were courageous.
Defeating ISIS has earned them new respect from their own men.
How has it changed for women?
They are able to claim their rights in every aspect of life. They are able to claim their rights in political settings and family life.
But she says there are still those who think like ISIS. So the women of Kobani are still in the fight. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.
Google accused by some of its former employees of telling its workers to get mental health counseling or even take a medical leave when they've complained about racism and sexism within the company. NBCNews.com reporter April Glazer joins me now. April, you spoke with Benjamin Cruz, an ex-Google employee who says they reported a racial incident. What did Cruz say happened?
Yeah, so Benjamin Cruz described to us that when he went to Human Resources about a time when a colleague had mentioned that his skin color appeared darker in person than she expected, which was really offensive to him. And this was after many other incidents had occurred on his team. The Human Resources person that he spoke with first told him to just assume the best intent. Well, that really didn't satisfy him because, like I said, there had been many other incidents on his team where he had experienced, racism and discrimination and felt that more should be done. So he asked them to look further into the incident. And after that, they suggested that he take a mental health leave. And, he told me that made him feel like he was the problem.
Has Google responded to Cruz's allegations here?
Yeah, Google said that, they have a process that they're extremely transparent about when employees raise complaints and that they investigate all complaints quite rigorously. And to be clear, it wasn't just Cruz that we spoke to. We also spoke to many current employees as well who said that this happens routinely. They said that when they go to Human Resources about issues of sexism or racism that they experience within the company, that then they're told to seek mental health care or to take a medical leave to address their mental health. And after this story came out, people across the technology industry, as well as just corporate America in general, told us that this has happened to them as well.
April, two prominent black women, both known for advocating for diversity in the tech industry, say they were pushed out of Google at the end of last year. What's their story? What do they say happened?
Sure. So with that, we're talking about Dr. Timnit Gebru, who was the co-leader of the ethical AI team at Google, which has had a lot of shakeups recently. But she was pushed out after an incident involving a paper that she wrote where, she says Google was trying to kind of keep information out of it or dictate how the paper was written. And then another incident involved April Curley, who we wrote about as well. She was a recruiter for historically black colleges and universities at Google, who said she was pushed out after complaining about instances of discrimination within the company and instances of harassment within the company. Timnit was also, Dr. Gebru was also very well known for reporting issues of discrimination, and both were pushed out. Both were also recommended to take after their mental health care and to get mental health resources when they complained about these instances.
April, Google releases an annual diversity report, as we know. In 2020, according to that report, the tech giant's black hires increased by less than 1%. Its Latino hires went up 0.2%. What is Google saying? What is it doing about that? Those pretty bleak numbers?
Yeah, and this is a problem across the technology industry, to be clear. It's not just Google. And this is despite the fact that they throw, hundreds of millions of dollars to try to rectify this problem, but it still seems so intractable. And, one thing that Google did, especially since Curley went public with her story about being pushed out, is that it announced an initiative to train 100,000 black women with tech skills. And then last June, Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, committed to more than $175 million that was supposed to promote racial equity. And that's also supposed to increase black representation at Google. To be clear, that came after an NBC News report last May that showed that Google began rolling back diversity and inclusion programs in 2018 to avoid appearing anti-conservative, according to our sources. That was a story I wrote, and Google did deny those claims.
April, they've got a ways to go, but reporting like this hopefully will put the pressure on them to keep moving in the right direction. Thank you so much for coming on News Now to talk about your story.
Thank you for having me.
For teachers in Georgia, the wait is over. They are finally eligible to get one of the coronavirus vaccines. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber in Duluth, Georgia, at a site that's setting aside shots for teachers. Ellison, tell us what it's been like there today.
Hey, Allison, things have been busy here, but moving quickly. There seems to be no shortage of Georgians who wanted to make and show up for appointments to get vaccinated at this site. This site is run by the local health department, and it is also where Gwinnett County Public Schools are encouraging their teachers, their bus drivers, people who have close contact with students to come and get vaccinated. Listen here.
So we're doing about 1,800 vaccine appointments for today, and 600 of those are set aside for teachers.
And I understand that there will be 600 doses of a vaccine set aside for teachers at this site every day for the next 2 weeks. Are you confident that there will be enough to vaccinate any educator in Gwinnett County who wants to get a vaccine?
Yes, we believe so. And some of our other smaller schools and private schools and other ones, we're also providing from different arrangements and stuff for those. So we do expect to be able to, in the next 2 weeks, get most of the teachers vaccinated in our county.
Health officials that we have spoken to say they have the resources and the physical space at this vaccination site to vaccinate more people. They're vaccinating, you heard her say, about 1,000 people a day right now. They say that they can actually double that. They just need the state to give them more vaccines. They say the only reason for the delay here right now, it's not space, it's not resources, it's simply a lack of supply. Allison.
So, Ellison, what are you hearing from teachers who are getting their shots there today? No doubt this is a pretty big moment for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, geez, are they thrilled? Every single person we stopped and spoke to who was an educator here today, as early as 9 a.m., they were thrilled to be able to finally get their vaccines. And I'll let you listen to some of what they had to say earlier this morning.
You know, as a teacher, you want to make sure that you are as organized as possible. So I tried to do it as fast as I could. And I'm just really excited to be able to come and have the opportunity to get my vaccine. And get back to normalcy, I guess.
As a state, I'm very happy that we've opened it up to educators. You know, I want the kids back in the classroom.
My wife and I are both educators, and we've been waiting for our turn, and a little disappointed that we have waited this long to vaccinate teachers, even though we have students in the building. We are excited, both of us, to get our vaccination. Both of our parents have been vaccinated at this point, and so we are just excited to get our own.
A number of Georgia school districts started their vaccination clinics or vaccination efforts to get staff vaccinated this week, but not all of them. There are some school districts like Fulton County and Atlanta City Public Schools who are planning to have a clinic later towards the end of the month. Allison.
Ellison, I understand Governor Kemp set aside the state's first full allotment of Johnson & Johnson shots for educators, but they're not where you are. Where did those shots go?
Right. So here they have the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, but the governor did set aside specifically the Johnson & Johnson vaccine allotment that Georgia got, 83,000 doses for educators. They say, the governor's office, when we spoke to them yesterday, a spokesperson said that they have already sent those to school districts or the health departments partnering with school districts to get their teachers and other educators who are eligible vaccinated with those doses. But our understanding is that the majority of those Johnson & Johnson vaccines are going to more rural areas where they don't have the necessary freezer equipment to store things like the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. They don't have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine here simply because they say they have the storage to be able to take the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and distribute it quickly. Other districts, other counties, they don't necessarily have all of that. Allison.
Ellison, it's great to hear that educators all across that state are getting their shots. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Joining me now, emergency medicine physician, Dr. Anand Swaminathan. Dr. Swaminathan, I want to get your reaction to this plan in Georgia. Is reserving the vaccine, particularly the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine, for essential workers or teachers in rural areas a smart strategy? And tell us, what else do you like? What do you dislike about this program?
That's a great question, Allison. I think the first and most important thing is it's great that they're getting vaccinated, and you get what vaccine you have available to you. So I encourage them to get the Johnson & Johnson if that's what's being made available. And I can't speak specifically to the issues in the different areas and what they can and can't store, but I don't know that this is the best use for that Johnson & Johnson. Let's remember first that schools are extremely safe, even without vaccinated teachers, especially in the younger age groups, as long as we do things like masking and good ventilation. Those are probably the most important things. The J&J has a lot of advantages for groups that you can't track down, that you can't keep tabs on. Teachers don't really fall into that group. So yes, this will get teachers vaccinated more quickly because it's only one shot. But I would like to see that really rolled out to people who are a little bit more difficult to reach. So I can tell you in my emergency department, we have the Johnson & Johnson available. We can give it to patients who are being discharged. And what I am finding as a really good place to use it is in patients who are homeless, patients who have jobs where they can't take off to come and get a vaccine. They don't have internet access or computers. That is the group that I think we really should be targeting with that vaccine, because it's a one shot and we've got them in a good place. Maybe pop-ups, rolling out mobile units where you don't have to make another appointment. I think these are the places where the Johnson & Johnson is really powerful.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky has said the next few months will be crucial in making sure that COVID variants don't derail our progress. Here she is with Rachel Maddow.
I think we need to understand that March and April are critical periods here. We have variants in this country. Those variants are increasingly transmissible. We know that they're more transmissible than the wild type virus. We also have more and more vaccine coming. And this is really why we have said for the next couple of months, while we are scaling up vaccination as much as we can, as fast as we can, as much vaccine as we can, please wear your mask, continue with the mitigation strategies, and give us a fighting chance of making sure that we can get vaccine into people as soon as possible.
According to the new CDC guidance out this week, fully vaccinated people can now get together indoors unmasked with other fully vaccinated people or low-risk people who aren't vaccinating yet. But what do you think about things like eating inside a restaurant or getting a haircut? Are there things that you would still advise fully vaccinated people to wait just a little longer to do?
Well, I think that the guidance that we've gotten is really good. It gives people a little bit of hope, a little bit of what's at the end if we get the vaccine out there. I think that there are a lot of situations where you can keep your mask on inside. So I'm getting my haircut. I've been fully vaccinated. I still keep my mask on. I think it's the right thing to do. Eating inside is a tricky one because you've got lots of people in a closed space. You don't know how good the ventilation is. I think if you can avoid it, I would. I don't think we should be opening up restaurants for full capacity. I think that's where we really will run a lot of risks. Not necessarily to the vaccinated people, but to the unvaccinated people and to the staff that's working there. So I don't think that we should be opening restaurants fully, a small number. And let's remember, in a lot of places, it's getting warmer, which means we can do more outdoor dining, which is probably the best bet right now.
I am looking forward to that, able to have a meal that I didn't cook somewhere outside. Those days are coming soon here on the East Coast. Dr. Swaminathan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison.
What will life look like on the other side of the pandemic? Tonight, NBC News Now hosts Savannah Sellers and Joe Fryer ask a team of experts that very question. It's part of our Life After Lockdown special coverage. Here's a preview.
Bottom line on herd immunity is that we're going to start to see it in regions of the country where at least 70% of people are vaccinated. The number for the entire country, I know people have said between 70 and 85%, but it will be pretty regional. And you'll see, for example, where the governor is in this region, New York and Connecticut and New Jersey, you might get to that sooner because we had a lot of people infected in the mid-Atlantic area. But it should be in the next 2 months that we'll start seeing the progress of herd immunity. And that'll protect children who can't get vaccinated.
Herd immunity is probably not going to be until this summer, but I can tell you that the overwhelming majority of our folks over the age of 65 have been vaccinated, and most of the people over the age of 55. And that's where 99% of our complications and fatalities, a lot of our demand upon our hospital services come from that demographic. So we feel pretty confident in the next 10 days we can cautiously reopen, but I'm not a Neanderthal. I'm a Neanderthal with a mask. We're going to keep wearing the masks and the social distancing in the restaurants.
I suffer from generalized anxiety disorder and panic attacks. And so, for me, I also do a lot of critical thinking. I go to the worst common denominator in any sort of critical thought. I have a compound worry on worry on worry. So for me personally, during the pandemic especially, it's helped to compartmentalize my life. Like, I literally just live like day to day. I wake up and I thank God that I've got another opportunity to get it right. And I just go, how can I be the best dad, the best, citizen, the best husband, the best coworker today? And what are the tasks in front of me? And I just jump from lily pad to lily pad in a given day. When I go to bed at night, it's like, okay, let's hope tomorrow I get another opportunity to do that. I don't get too far ahead of myself in a calendar. That helps me a lot. Also, big helps for me, reggae music. I listen to Bob Marley Legend every single day during the pandemic. Red wine was very helpful. And
ditto.
And this, and just talking with friends, checking in on people in my life to make sure that they're okay. Because the more you talk about it, selfishly, the better you're going to feel.
I think people need to remember that we have to target restaurants and small businesses specifically because those are the businesses that have the least amount of cash on hand. If we lose those small businesses, we lose Main Street, right? And, I know the world of restaurants better than I know the world of, family-owned shoe stores, but I can tell you they all sort of operate the same way. And the existing small business relief programs just aren't doing enough to put people who work in restaurants and bars in particular back to work. We lost, over $200 billion in sales during the pandemic alone. The Restaurants Act that we've been working on for a year as a co-founder of the Independent Restaurant Coalition is only asking for $120 billion. We're actually losing more money in national GDP than we are in the amount of money that would save our industry. And it's the same numbers that are reflected in other businesses on Main Street. The shoe store feeds the restaurant, and the restaurant feeds the shoe store. Main Street USA needs special attention. We need to stop giving large amounts of money to special interest groups and big corporations and actually backstop small businesses and independent restaurants.
Got to agree with Carson Daly there. Little Red Wine and Bob Marley can help a whole lot. And you can catch the full special, Beyond COVID, Life After Lockdown, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on NBC News Now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.